Gyeongju, a city that holds 1,000 years of history. The cherished values, preserved over time, have shaped who we are today. Now, through new encounters, we step into a better future. Sustainability, innovation. With the spirit of connection, a new millennium story begins. As APEC and Gyeongju come together. APEC meets Gyeongju.
In our headlines on this Friday, October 10th here in South Korea. North Korea is set to hold a major military parade, possibly tonight, to mark the 80th anniversary of the founding of its ruling Workers' Party. Eyes are now on whether Pyongyang's new long-range missile will be displayed at the event, which is expected to be attended by the second highest-ranking officials from China and Russia. South Korea's stock market closed at an all-time high today, as the benchmark KOSPI climbed above 3,600 points. But the Korean currency is weakening against the US dollar, now trading at a 5-month low. The Israeli government has approved a US broker ceasefire resolution, which includes the release of all hostages held in Gaza. Israelis and Palestinians celebrated the potential end to the war, with US President Donald Trump saying Israeli hostages will likely be released early next week. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Peunji, filling in for Min-seoni. We begin in North Korea, where a massive military parade could take place tonight, celebrating the 80th anniversary of the founding of its ruling Workers' Party. Marking the occasion, top officials from China, Russia, and Vietnam arrived in the North Korean capital to take part in the event. Our Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
North Korea is expected to hold a massive military parade in Pyongyang's Kim Il-sung Square to mark the 80th anniversary of the founding of its ruling Workers' Party. There had been speculation that the parade would take place last night on the eve of the anniversary, but so far there has been no official confirmation that the event was held. Attention is focused on what new weapons North Korea may unveil during the parade. The regime previously announced it was developing a new solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile known as the Hwasong-20, sparking speculation that it could make its debut in this anniversary event. If revealed, the Hwasong-20 would represent a major advancement in North Korea's missile technology, as solid-fuel ICBMs can be launched more quickly and are harder to detect than traditional liquid fuel systems. The parade is expected to feature high-ranking foreign guests, including top officials from China, Russia, and Vietnam, highlighting North Korea's deepening ties with its key partners. China's Premier Li Chang, the country's number 2 after President Xi Jinping, arrived in Pyongyang on Thursday, marking the first visit by a Chinese premier to North Korea in 16 years. Russia has also sent a high-level delegation led by Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, who is often described as the country's second-in-command. In addition, Vietnam's Communist Party chief To Lam arrived in Pyongyang for a state visit, the first by Vietnam's top leaders since 2007. According to the Vietnam news agency, Lam and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un held talks and agreed to strengthen cooperation, elevate bilateral relations, and expand high-level exchanges across party, government, and regional levels. Pundits say the presence of top figures from China, Russia, and Vietnam signals North Korea's intent to showcase solidarity with its traditional allies at a time of growing geopolitical tensions. The parade would not only mark a milestone in the Workers' Party's history, but also serve as a powerful display of North Korea's military capabilities and its strengthening diplomatic ties with Beijing, Moscow, and Hanoi. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Ahead of the military parade, North Korea unveiled new strategic weapons at its arms exhibition. According to a report by South Korea's People Power Party lawmaker Yoo Young-won on Thursday, Pyongyang exhibited new submarine-launched ballistic missiles, along with new types of hypersonic cruise missiles. The new SLBMs appear larger than the existing Pukuksong 5 and feature a blunter warhead, suggesting an increased payload capacity. And its newly developed hypersonic cruise missiles appear similar to Russia's supersonic anti-ship cruise missile. The report warned that South Korean Navy vessels around the northwestern islands could fall within these missiles' strike range. And the land postal route connecting Sinuiju, North Korea, and Dandong, China, officially resumed services on September 25th. Now, that's according to China's State Post Bureau on Friday, which said it aims to offer greater convenience for people in both countries to send and receive mail. The reopening signals progress in normalizing relations and suggests potential momentum for stalled economic exchanges, like the new Yalu River Bridge opening, which has been on hold since North Korea closed its borders in 2020. Meanwhile, senior diplomats of South Korea and the United States have met in Seoul for a rare strategic dialogue ahead of a leaders' summit expected later this month. Vice Foreign Minister Park Yun-ju held the 10th ROK-U.S. Strategic Dialogue with U.S. Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs Allison Hooker on Friday, marking the first such meeting held since 2021. Ahead of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Leaders meeting in Gyeongju City this month, the two deputy ministers are likely to coordinate a summit between Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Donald Trump. Other key issues include ways to modernize the bilateral alliance, regional security, and Korean Peninsula affairs. A leading expert on Korean Peninsula affairs, Hooker played a key role in the U.S.-North Korea negotiations during the first Trump administration. Now, on the economic front, South Korean stocks continue to rally as the benchmark KOSPI hit another record high today, closing above 3,600 points for the first time. Meanwhile, the Korean currency continues to weaken against the U.S. dollar, with the $1 exchange rate now trading at its weakest level in 5 months. Our Park Jun-won explains more.
South Korea's benchmark KOSPI closed past the 3,600 mark for the first time on Friday, the first session after the long Chuseok holiday, which kept markets closed for a week. The KOSPI opened at just over 3,598, up 1.38% from last Thursday's close. It then briefly touched the 3,600 mark during the day and closed at over 3,610 points, a 1.73% increase since Thursday last week. The main sectors that drove the market were semiconductor and nuclear power plant-related stocks, such as Samsung Electronics, SK hynix, and Tusan Enerbility. The three stocks gained 6.07%, 8.22%, and 14.97% respectively.
During the Chuseok holiday, when the South Korean stock market did not open over in the U.S., AI sentiment improved as OpenAI and AMD agreed on chip supply and investment cooperation. Tusan Enerbility today also gained on rising power demand, driven by large-scale AI-related capital spending, with nuclear power seen as a key stable energy source.
On the foreign exchange market, the $1 rate soared and closed at 1,421 Korean won per US dollar, up 21 won since Thursday last week. This marks the highest level in 5 months, mainly due to sluggish tariff deal talks between Seoul and Washington, the ones accompanying weakening with the Japanese yen's depreciation, and the recent rising dollar index. Although the dollar index has gone down by over 10% since its yearly high, the $1 exchange rate has gone down by 4.5%, which alludes to the weakening of the Korean won.
In recent weeks, the key factor behind the $1 fluctuations has been uncertainty over how South Korea will allocate its $350 billion investment in the U.S. Also, the yen's weakness following Japan's leadership change and policy expectations has weighed on the Korean currency.
As the KOSPI has ridden a wave of record-breaking gains in the past few months, investors remain cautious about looming tariff talks and the persistent strength of the US dollar, which could negatively affect future investor sentiment. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
At the National Assembly, with the first parliamentary inspection under the current administration set to begin on Monday, the ruling and opposition parties have pledged to scrutinize policy agendas and other contentious issues. Our political correspondent An Sung-jin tells us more.
The National Assembly will launch its first parliamentary audit of the Lee Jae-myung administration next Monday. From October 13th till November 6th, 17 standing committees of the National Assembly are to inspect over 830 government departments and agencies. The ruling and opposition parties are gearing up for some fierce political clashes amid a series of controversial issues, with both the former Yoon Suk-yeol administration and the current government in their crosshairs. The ruling Democratic Party's primary focus is on addressing the actions of the previous administration.
This parliamentary audit is about clearing the remnants of the Yoon administration's insurrection. We are committed to addressing the damage caused by the previous government's illegal actions and policy failures.
Intense scrutiny is expected on the Justice Ministry, Defense Ministry, Foreign Ministry, and Interior Ministry, alongside controversial policies from the previous administration, including the increase of medical school quota and the Blue Whale project to search for potential oil and gas reserves in the East Sea. The DP is also likely to bring up its allegations of political bias and election interference against Supreme Court Chief Justice Cho Hee-dae. Meanwhile, the main opposition People Power Party vowed to expose the current administration's policy failures and mismanagement.
The People Power Party has three key objectives during the parliamentary inspection: defending freedom and fairness, restoring economic growth, and ensuring transparency in government operations.
Lawmakers are expected to press the government on the economic impact of U.S. tariffs as well as mounting concerns over inflation and instability in the real estate market. Other contentious issues likely to come up include the recent government IT system outage and the arrest of the former Korea Communications Commission chairwoman, who has subsequently been released. With both the ruling and opposition parties vowing to leave no stone unturned, the two sides are expected to clash head-on over a wide range of issues. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, President Lee Jae-myung, despite being officially on leave, visited the National Information Resources Service in Daejeon this morning, the site of a data center fire 2 weeks ago that has caused a massive outage across hundreds of government services. The presidential spokesperson Kim Nam-jun said he was briefed on the recovery process and met with staff who have been working to restore the damaged systems, even during the Chuseok holiday. The president emphasized the need for a swift recovery and strong preventive measures and ordered the creation of a safe working environment for those on site. As of Friday noon, 30.6% of the affected systems have been restored. Over in the Middle East, the first phase of a U.S. brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hamas has now been officially approved by Israel's government, marking a breakthrough after 2 years of war in Gaza. The deal promises the release of all remaining hostages and an end to fighting, but questions remain about what comes next. Our Buneiran reports.
Israel's government has approved a ceasefire resolution that includes the release of all hostages held in Gaza, both the living and the remains of the dead. The vote came late Thursday night local time, clearing the way for the first phase of U.S. President Donald Trump's peace plan to take effect. Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner attended the meeting, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu personally thanked them for their work.
We know that it's for the benefit of Israel and the United States, for the benefit of decent people everywhere, and for the benefit of these families who will finally get to be with their loved ones.
Trump said the release of hostages could happen soon and hinted at a visit to the region as early as Sunday.
I think it's the hostages will be coming back Monday or Tuesday. I'll probably be there. I hope to be there.
Under the deal, Hamas will free all remaining Israeli hostages in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Israeli troops will begin withdrawing from parts of Gaza, and fleets of trucks carrying food and medical aid will surge into the territory, with the United Nations declaring full support. But implementation of the plan raises difficult questions about what comes next, including whether Hamas will disarm, how a full Israeli withdrawal will unfold, and who will govern Gaza once the fighting stops. To help oversee those next steps, AP News reported that U.S. officials said a new coordination center is being established, staffed by about 200 American service members with expertise in logistics, transportation, security, and engineering. A senior defense official reportedly said no American troops will enter Gaza, but they'll help monitor the ceasefire's implementation and the transition into a civilian administration in the territory. Celebrations and praise poured in from around the world, including South Korea. In a statement issued by its foreign ministry spokesperson, Seoul said it highly values President Trump's leading proposal for this agreement, as well as the mediation efforts of neighboring countries in the region. It also pledged to actively participate in international efforts to promote peace in the Middle East. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Shifting gears, it seems Koreans still can't get enough of their favorite comfort food, ramyeon. According to the World Instant Noodles Association, Koreans ate 4.1 billion packs of ramyeon last year, or about 79 per person, making them the second biggest ramyeon lovers in the world after Vietnamese consumers. Until 2020, Korea held the top spot, but Vietnam has since taken the crown. Industry experts say while the popular noodle dish began in Korea as an affordable meal during tough times, in Southeast Asia, it's often eaten as a light snack, boosting their per-person tally. And Korean food took center stage at the world's largest food fair, marking a significant push for K-food into the rapidly growing European market. Our economics correspondent Moon Ji-young has more.
This year's Anuga, one of the world's top 3 food fairs, saw a Korean pavilion securing a main booth in the center of the exhibition hall. As the fair's first-ever partner country, South Korea operated a dedicated K-food pavilion, garnering much acclaim. The event, held in Cologne, Germany, drew 8,000 companies from 118 countries with 160,000 food and distribution industry officials. The Korean pavilion showcased an array of foods, including beloved traditional staples such as kimchi, tteokbokki, and ramyeon. A broad display highlighted the immense popularity and innovative drive behind K-food's global surge. Fueled by growing global interest in K-culture, this momentum is now accelerating the expansion of iconic K-food deeper into the European market. Capitalizing on this trend, Nongsim caught attention by prominently featuring characters from its recently released collaboration product, K-pop Demon Hunters, at the front of its booth.
There's a lot of ramen, flavors, and they're all pretty spicy, which I like, because this spice makes it really addictive, and I really like it a lot. And yeah, all I can say, I really like Korean ramen.
While K-food exports have traditionally focused on Asia and North America, this heightened visibility at the event underscores a strategic shift. Domestic food companies are now clearly poised to accelerate their efforts in penetrating the rapidly growing European market, signaling a robust future for K-food on the global stage. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
K-pop girl band Twice today released a special album titled 10 The Story Goes On to mark the group's 10th anniversary this month. The album features the lead track Me Plus You, along with solo songs from each of the 9 members. On the same day, BLACKPINK's Jisoo dropped her new single Eyes Closed in collaboration with Zayn, a former member of One Direction. It's her first solo release in 8 months and follows BLACKPINK's latest track Jump, released just 3 months ago.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. Hungarian writer László Krasznahorkai has been awarded the 2025 Nobel Prize in Literature for his powerful explorations of modern chaos and the human spirit. The Swedish Academy praised him as a master of the long form, capturing the struggle between hope and despair. Born in Hungary in 1954, Krasznahorkai first gained international acclaim with Satan Tango and The Melancholy of Resistance, which were both adapted into films. Critics call his work haunting and lyrical, blending realism and philosophy to question how people endure uncertainty. In a statement, he said the prize, quote, belongs to everyone who still believes in language. The Nobel Committee will announce the Peace Prize later this week. And in the United States, the government shutdown enters its 9th day, with President Donald Trump declaring he will restore operations only after removing programs, quote, favored by Democrats. Around 750,000 federal workers remain furloughed or unpaid. Essential services from transport to food assistance are still under strain. Trump says he'll cut funding for green energy and urban aid while keeping military spending intact. Democrats accuse him of, quote, weaponizing the budget for political gain. Meanwhile, markets have reacted mildly, but analysts warn prolonged closure could slow fourth quarter growth. Talks will resume on Friday as both parties face pressure from public workers and investors. In India, police have arrested the owner of a pharmaceutical company after a cough syrup was linked to the deaths of at least 21 children. The victims, all under 5-year-olds, died in Madhya Pradesh over the past month after being prescribed the cough syrup known as Coldriff. Investigators found it was contaminated with diethylene glycol, a chemical used in antifreeze that can be fatal even in small amounts. Police have arrested the owner of Coldriff manufacturer Srezan Pharma, charging him with culpable homicide and drug adulteration. India's health ministry has banned the syrup in several states and ordered wider testing of children's medicines. The World Health Organization has asked whether contaminated batches were exported abroad, as children in Gambia and Uzbekistan have died from Indian-made cough syrup in the past. In New York, more than 250,000 fans are flooding into Comic-Con 2025. And this year, K-content is taking center stage. Attendees packed the Javits Center dressed as their favorite characters. Organizers expect about 250,000 visitors over the 4 days, celebrating everything from comics and anime to gaming and wrestling. And Korea's presence is unmistakable as a new K-content pavilion showcases hit webtoons like Solo Leveling and True Beauty alongside the voice cast of K-pop Demon Hunters. Daejeon, Arirang News.
From today to tomorrow morning, it is expected to rain mainly over the Seoul metropolitan area, Gangwon-do province, and Chungcheongbuk-do province due to the rain clouds moving eastward from overseas. The expected rainfall will be 20 to 60 millimeters in northern parts of Gyeonggi-do province and northern parts of Gangwon-do province. This rain is expected to continue until early next week. On Sunday, it will rain in southern Gyeonggi-do province, Gangwon-do province, and the Chungcheong-do provinces, and then spread to the southern parts of the country during the night. It will rain all over the country on Monday and Tuesday. Saturday morning will start off at 18 degrees Celsius in Seoul, Daejeon, and Daegu, 21 degrees in Busan. Highs will move up to 23 degrees in Seoul, 28 degrees in Daegu and Busan. It is expected to rain over the eastern and southern parts of Gangwon-do province on Wednesday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Now that's all we have for this edition of Arirang News. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for our panel session coming up next.
Building a sustainable tomorrow. Connect, innovate, and prosper. Connecting goods to goods, region to region, people to people, generation to generation. Facilitating innovation for all, closing the digital divide. Building an inclusive technology ecosystem, promoting digital innovation by deepening dialogues on AI. Achieving shared prosperity, addressing global challenges. Energy transition, climate change, population decline, and pandemic responses. APEC-related events continuing in Seoul, the capital of the Republic of Korea, where diverse cultures blend. Jeju, the beautiful island, blessed with UNESCO Natural World Heritage Sites. Incheon, the vibrant international city, central hub connecting Asia-Pacific. Busan, the largest maritime city, centering around maritime trade and the logistics industry. And Gyeongju, the city hosting the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting, where 2,000 years of profound history and modern, trendy, and youthful energy blend in a perfect balance. Here, a new chapter of economic exchanges will unfold for a better future.
October 10th marks Pregnant Women's Day here in South Korea, which comes as part of efforts to promote an atmosphere of care and consideration for expecting mothers. On Press Perspective today, we touch upon this particular day and others like it, aimed at advancing overall social well-being. Do stay with us. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Friday, October 10th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. For those of you here in Korea, you're tuning in after a long extended holiday that began last Friday to mark National Foundation Day, followed by the Chuseok holiday, and more recently, that is yesterday, Hangul Day. Now, staying with this atmosphere of goodwill, if you will, today we focus on findings that highlight the importance of seeking to strengthen broader social health. For more on this, I have Anna with the French Sunday paper, La Tribune Dimanche, here in the studio. Anna, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today.
I also have writer Colin Marshall with the pundit's take on today's topics. Colin, it's great to have you here.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Right, Anna, let's start with you. Let's begin then with the findings that show a tangible improvement in perceptions about marriage and childbirth among young Korean adults over the past year.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's worth noting that South Korea has long faced the lowest birth rate among the OECD countries, and with just the 0.75% children per woman in 2024. And according to the OECD, this has led to projections that the country's population could halve by 2082 and even fall down 1/3 in 2100. But however, this critical situation, there may be a glimmer of hope since some Korean studies conducted by Korean institutions showed an improvement in how young people are viewing marriage and having children. For example, one survey conducted in August among about 3,000 people aged from 25 to 49 nationwide, found that about 3/4 of respondents are viewing having children and marriage more positively. And actually, this improved perception is reflected in real life trends. For example, from January to July, there were an increase of 7% in the number of births in South Korea, and as well as for the number of marriage. And the total fertility rate also went up a little bit from 0.72 to 0.75 between 2023 and 2024. But however, the situation remains far from resolved in South Korea because the fertility rate is still one of the more extraordinarily low in the OECD country, and much more will be needed to reverse this long-term trend. And personally, I am not yet convinced that the government's efforts have started to pay off because they have this big objective of fertility rate of 1 by 2030. So what I can say now is nowadays Korean people are more willing to having children and get married with higher income and easier access to parental leave. So I think the government should focus on these efforts to make the situation better.
Right. And before we focus on the government's efforts, and Colin, what do you believe has been prompting this shift in perception?
This is a question that comes up in many of the articles covering this subject, and it generates a lot of speculation. Nobody knows for sure, of course, but there are a few factors that come up over and over again, or that are cited over and over again. One of them being our distance now from the COVID-19 pandemic, or corona, as it was called here in Korea. It's 2025 now, of course, and it was about 3 years, 2020 through 2023, that for a lot of people around the world, but in Korea as well, life was sort of put on pause. And so whether or not somebody had an intent to get married, start a family before the pandemic, afterward, I think more were thinking about it. More were thinking, well, okay, we lost a big chunk of time there. So, what needs to be done now? How do we make up for this lost time? And if you did intend to do that, then it became more of a priority afterwards. So you have that, and you have the corona effect. And then as well, I think there's a bit of an environmental effect that causes. When you see in your social environment, in your friends, in your friend group, or in your family, or in your professional environment, more people or at least a few more people starting to have kids, or at least openly considering it, then for you too, it feels like a more viable proposition. So I think there is that. I mean, this is a country of trends. Let's face it, when a few people start doing something, a lot of them can start doing it suddenly. So I think that is also a power that can be harnessed here in Korea, the sheer force trends have, the way they can sweep through a city like Seoul. You know, once you get a few people on the bandwagon of having a family, I think it could make it a lot easier. You get the momentum. It's like, you know, if you're pulling a car with your bare hands, the hard part is starting it moving. Once it's moving, you can get it moving pretty easily. But I think that's a big part of it myself.
Right, and despite the shift in perception though, Hannah, a UN report shows that South Korean women are least inclined to have children as compared to their counterparts in, I believe, 8 countries and territories with comparable data. How do you care to explain this reality based on your observations here in the country?
Well, yes, this UN report highlights a striking reality, which is that Korean women show the lowest willingness to have children among these 8 countries, which include like 6 European countries and Hong Kong. And in contrast, Koreans' main intentions are closer to global averages, which is creating the largest gender gap among these 8 countries. But interestingly, this reluctance of Korean women doesn't reflect a lack of belief of the importance of having children. And even more, like in this survey, Korean women consistently rate having children as essential like for a happy life. It's essential for a happy life, and it was higher than in any of the other countries surveyed. So why this contradiction? The studies point out structural and social pressures because Korean women are facing career interruptions, childcare burdens, and limited family supporting policies. So it's making it difficult for them to act on their intentions. For example, in the survey, a young Korean woman interviewed said she deeply values children, but feels that having a child now would be impossible given her job and the lack of support for working mothers. So in this regard, experts emphasize that improving gender equality, expanded child support, and creating a family-friendly working environment would be essential to help Korean women having the children they want.
Right. And Colin, as Anna mentioned, the Korean government has over the years rolled out quite a number of measures, campaigns to push up its plunging birth rate. Which measure do you suppose stays in your mind?
I remember going to the headquarters of KBS, the national broadcaster, a few months ago and seeing a plaque newly installed right there on the front wall by the entrance, announcing essentially that KBS had been enlisted as an official broadcasting organization against the working against the fall in birth rate, or the anti-low birth rate fighting organization, something like that, if you want to be literal about the translation. And they have put on a campaign that's been going a while now. I think the slogan is "우리 아이, 우리 미래," our children, our future. And most of this campaign involves the imagery or the messaging you would expect. But what does stick in my mind is a collaboration this campaign did with a YouTuber, a child YouTuber known as Daejeon, who's one of the, I think, the most popular child YouTube star in Korea. And there's a channel that's been going on his whole life. I think he's about 4 now, that's followed his sort of daily routine from infancy through toddlerhood and all that. And this campaign brought young Daejeon on to discuss the impending birth of his younger sister and how excited he was, how he was anticipating the birth of Dongdongi, was her Daejeon, her pre-birth name, and that was striking. This enlistment of a YouTube star by a state broadcaster to sort of push up the birth rate a bit more. It was more memorable than the rest of the campaign, and I do wonder. Well, it made me think. Maybe channels like Daejeon's channel have done a lot themselves to raise interest, at least, in starting a family among the many viewers that channel has. Although it's a double-edged sword because it can, it shows the joys of childhood and parenthood, but it also, how to put it, it opens a sort of channel to vicariously enjoy those joys without the burdens that can come with them. I say this as a father of newborn twins, but this is much on the internet, right? It shows you when someone's scrolling through Instagram or whatever, they're seeing all these pictures of, the good life, of vacations, of foods, of everything like that, without any of the sort of more difficult qualities that can come with them. They're deriving a certain pleasure, which maybe is making them less willing or less able to deal with the difficulties of bringing those things into their life for real. So it works both ways, I think, but it was a savvy move, I would say, on KBS's part to enlist a social media star. Now, what effect it will have, I think it's going to take a while to find out, but that does stick in my mind.
This is an impromptu question, Colin, but as a father of two adorable toddlers, what support have you been receiving from the government?
There are payments that everybody gets. You get a certain voucher, they say, to start out. You can spend on services and products related to childcare. I guess you could spend them on a variety of different things, but that's been helpful, of course. But I think there's also been just the sort of institutions they have in Korea, like the Choryewon, the Sanhu Choryewon, the sort of like a hotel where they take care of all the tasks and associated duties. They look after the kids when they're at night when they're not sleeping, so you can get a full night's sleep. That's not a government service, but the government does provide payments which you can use for that kind of thing. So I think that's it helps to get this money, but it wasn't necessarily for us what made the difference between having a family or not having a family.
Right, something to think about then. And let's now move on to another issue of interest. Today, October 10th, is also World Mental Health Day. Now, the World Health Organization has sounded the alarm over the mounting global cases of psychological disorders in recent years. Could you start off with these concerns?
Yeah, well, the World Health Organization is sounding like a serious alarm that over 1 billion people worldwide now live with mental health conditions, from anxiety and depression to even more severe conditions. And these conditions affect individuals as well as family and also economies, because its costs to the global economy about $1 trillion a year, and young people are particularly affected, with suicide remaining a leading cause of death in this age group globally. But even given this critical situation, most countries are still underinvesting. For example, governments spend only 2% of their health budgets on mental health, and there are only just 13 mental health professionals for like 100,000 people globally. And many countries still rely on psychiatric hospitals. However, the organization recognized that there were some positive improvements. For example, mental health is being integrated in primary care, and there are early interventions programs developing in schools, and most countries are including psychological support in emergencies. More importantly, recently the UN has led a high-level meeting on September, and world leaders adopted a declaration calling for urgent action, including better prevention and integration of mental health in primary care. So, in short, the UN and the World Health Organization are sending a clear message. Mental health is a global urgent priority, and coordinated actions are needed to help these people suffering from these disorders.
Right. Colin, here in South Korea, as compared to perhaps 2 decades ago, the stigma surrounding mental health issues appears to be easing. What have been your observations here on the ground?
Yeah, I've been here not 2, but 1 decade myself, so I can speak from that perspective. 10 years ago, I remember I would hear this, the Korean word for crazy, michida. You'd get a lot of warnings not to use it as you would use crazy in English, because in English, crazy is not necessarily very pejorative. You can be like, oh, he's so crazy, oh, you're crazy, everything's crazy. It can have a positive meaning, in fact, or just mean somebody is sort of capricious or whimsical. Whereas here, that is not the meaning of michida, and this is or was taken as a highly offensive term. You could start a fight if you called somebody by this word. So that attitude, that difference in attitude was evident to me. And I would hear this complaint as well, maybe from Korean Americans specifically, that their Korean parents didn't take seriously mental health issues. Their parents would always think you can just snap yourself out of anything if you put your nose to the grindstone. Or they would complain about Korea itself, how there was not really a robust community of therapists or psychologists or professionals of that kind. or maybe not even that there weren't many, but that it's not a high-profile sector of the economy or sector of the, how to put it, medical world here. People don't instinctively seek treatment, psychological treatment. But you can go too far in that direction. I mean, when I'm in the US or when I'm looking at American corners of the internet, I do notice how the tendency towards psychologization, if we can say that, is very strong, maybe too strong. You go on YouTube and the ads you see are for a lot of ads for remote therapy. You have people staring at the camera and telling you, like, I know you think you don't need therapy, but you do. You know, it's off-putting from at least my perspective, having been out of the US a long time. And as well, when there's violent crime in the US, as there often is, those crimes can involve people who are mentally unwell. There was a high-profile stabbing on a train in North Carolina, in Charlotte, a couple months ago, of a Ukrainian refugee, actually. And it was just a random attack by a man who was clearly, I mean, he has psychological problems. He's been arrested dozens of times. He was under the impression that this young lady was reading his thoughts. So a classic sort of, oh, you know something is wrong mentally. But in the US, oftentimes, a condition like that means you're considered unfit to stand trial. So you're not actually jailed. You're released back into society. Especially in the US, the political left there's the sense that if behavior has if it's rooted psychologically, if it has a probable or plausible psychological cause, it shouldn't be punished or dealt with. So the US has gone too far on that side. Korea, perhaps you could say, it doesn't acknowledge enough yet the importance of mental health, but you can get to the point where you are considering mental health to the exclusion of all else, and nothing ever gets fixed. So there's a road to be traveled between those two extremes, I would say.
Right, and against that backdrop, new government findings show that suicide has overtaken cancer as the top cause of death among South Koreans in their 40s. What has been shared about the causes behind the surging cases of such tragedies here in the country?
Yeah, well, so behind this surge, because this is like the first time since records began in 1883 that suicide has overtaken cancer as the leading cause of death among people in their 40s, experts point to a mix of mental health struggles and economic pressures as key drivers. Because in South Korea, people in their 40s are a critical age group for the workforce. They are facing financial stress, career pressures, and sometimes they also have to deal with children and aging parents. So yeah, this is marking the highest toll in 13 years and pushing the national suicide rate almost 3 times to the OECD average. So this is very concerning for the country, particularly given that at the same time, suicide remains the leading cause of death among teenagers and people in their 20s and 30s, also facing like academic pressure, job insecurity, and social isolation. And the government also shouldn't forget that among South Korean people, there are also elderly people, and some of them are suffering from isolations and sometimes also like quietly letting themselves die in isolation. So this is very concerning.
Right. Colin, President Lee Jae-myung has called contradictory the campaign to raise birth rates in the absence of a campaign to lower suicide rates. What do you believe are perhaps the respective roles of the government and the society itself to prevent suicides and promote, of course, birth rates?
Yes, I've heard him speak about this, and he's right in a sense that these two problems cause the same effect in a way. You have the diminution of the population, but I myself have written about them as two sides of the same coin. Not everybody likes that framing. You know, you can say that the drop of the birth rate is a bit like a sort of national retreat into a kind of state-like death, or you can look at it the other way around as well. But at the same time, I wonder, these problems both have social causes. There are factors embedded in society. One of them, I mean, the act of taking one's own life is often referred to in the Korean media as the 극단적인 선택, the extreme choice, and it tells you that it is considered a choice. Whereas in the U.S., I think there's not that kind of legitimacy to it. We have this slogan often repeated: suicide is never the answer. There are never circumstances, or there are very seldom circumstances under which people understand why somebody would do that. Here, there are more situations where you'll hear people say, oh, I can see what other choice did they have. It's not necessarily that it's excused, but in certain high-profile cases where somebody gets in trouble, a politician say, and they're under investigation, well, if they make the extreme choice, often that investigation will end and there will be a presumption of innocence, whereas in the US it would be a presumption of guilt. So there are a set of cultural assumptions that are different, and I wouldn't say that Korean culture legitimizes this, but it's a different attitude than there is in the US. And at the same time, with the low birth rate, there are also a set of cultural assumptions, maybe including what standard of living you need to meet in order to even consider starting a family, that also obtains, that also has a strong effect. And I do wonder how much government policy can really move the needle on that, in that how much can the policy change the attitudes? That's a question I have. Certainly government policy, as I mentioned, the money that gets paid out to expecting parents makes it easier, but I think that sort of thing mostly helps when you've already decided you want to have a family, when you're already inclined to start a family. When you're in a position where you don't know if it's even going to be possible, you can't see the road forward, or you can't even see how to put it, how to take the next step in your life, that level of despair. I don't know if the state is well equipped to help. That's more of a situation where your more immediate social surroundings, your more immediate community has, if not failed you, then is in some sense non-existent. I mean, Korea has undergone, this is a cliche to say, but so much technological change, and as a result, so much economic change, that the society looks very little like it did 30, 40, 50 years ago. In many ways, it looks much better than it did at that time. But with that positive change, with that development, comes a certain, as I say, a rise in expectations and a sense that everything is a bit more difficult even to start doing. Things become more burdensome to even consider when you have all this sort of these extra expectations, this extra weight, the extra sort of everything that goes along with being a highly developed country, which Korea is now. And of course, you see this birth rate problem in not just Korea, where it is extreme, but pretty much every developed country in the world. So Korea has, yes, Korean society has problems, but they're the problems of every developed country, sometimes in extremis, but they're not different in kind. They're different in degree.
Right. Well, here in Korea, given the shift in perception with regard to marriage and childbirth among young South Koreans, perhaps now's the time for the government to take on a proactive approach to the issue. All right, Colin, as always, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend.